Hey, good morning. So we've been going and doing something different. We've been going through a book, which is something that we haven't done before, at least in this kind of a context and environment. We've been going through Rebecca Lyon's book on rhythms of renewal. Several of you have gotten that and been reading along. Some of you have downloaded it on Audible. Others of you have looked at it at Kindle. And you've been processing this. And if you haven't started, we still have copies here, or you can go to any of those places and get them. But what we've been processing and what we've been learning and what we've been evaluating is we think you should probably have more than an alarm clock to just kind of have your day set and mark through this. You should have more to live for than just your calendar. We shouldn't be on Tuesday going, oh my word, is it Friday yet? I mean, there should be more to the rhythms of our life so that we're just not like, oh, I just need a day off and when's vacation and all these kinds of things, because we've been designed in such a way where we should have a healthy and sustainable rhythm, a healthy and sustainable cadence that we can go through life with. Because everything in this world has a rhythm. Everything in this world has a cadence. Our bodies have a rhythm and a cadence. We have a pulse. We have things in our day has a rhythm. The month has a rhythm. The year has a rhythm. Seasons are a rhythm. And so when we look at this, we'll realize that we were designed and created to live in rhythm. And when we get out of rhythm is usually when problems begin to arise in life. And so I had somebody recently kind of suggest that the Bible exists to take away certain things in your life. And that's not true at all. The Bible exists so really it's because a lot of things happened. It was written down, but it's not trying to take rhythms from you. It's trying to give you a rhythm and kind of make you aware of a rhythm that will help you to live life to the fullest. And today, we're going to start really at the very beginning and acknowledge that everything on earth was created in a rhythm, and we were made in the image of God. We were made to be like Christ. We were made for eternity. So the very first verse of the Bible, this may have even been maybe the very first verse you heard in the Bible after John 3:16, is Genesis 1:1. And in Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning, starts with the preposition, God. So we have our, proper noun, God did something. God created the heavens and the earth. And it's this designation, this is the very first verb we see in the Bible. The very first verb we have is this designation as God as creator. Now, we don't know how he created everything. We don't know the timeline of all those kinds of things. What it tries to establish is the who. The who of creation is God. And if we are made in the image of God, then we are also people who should create, be creative, dream. Because God created it, and God kind of loved what he created it, and he kind of seeks to save us in the midst of all these kinds of things. And when we see this God who is active, who has been creating and creative, and we're made in his image. Now, a couple things about what God created. God didn't create in such a way where he's like a shopkeeper who sets it up and then just kind of actively just watches the creation in every moment. He didn't say, wow, I just want you to look at my creation and go, that is incredible. I hope it lasts for a while. Good luck, creation. So we don't necessarily look back and see the evidence of God. We can also look around in the present and see the activity of God's creative work. But the fact that anything exists at all kind of gets to this primordial mystery about that points us back to God. So we can just look around and go, a cell exists, and we can say a cell exists just as much as we could look at a constellation and say, yep, that exists. We can, find a mussel or a clam in the sea and say, yeah, that exists. And we can point to that just as much as we can see a mountain and go, yeah, that exists as well. And the fact that those things exist reveals to us a divine mystery that God is all around us in what he has created. Now, this is classically known as a teleological argument for the existence of God. You do not need to know that for the quiz at the end, because there's not a quiz at the end. And after all, you're on summer break. But a teleological argument for the existence of God, and the reason I want to go through this is because I want you to know that when you put your faith in God, that you're not just making some random arbitrary decision that's based off of fate or good luck or any of those kinds of things. A teleological existence for the argument for the existence of God is basically this. It's the watchmaker argument, is that a watch is so complicated and so complex that it had to be designed. The same thing would be true about your phone, your iPhone, your Android, whatever it is you have. You could look at that and pull that out and go, you know what? I don't think that this thing just happened. This thing is so complex and can do so many different things. Somebody had to design it. Somebody had to create this. And that's a teleological argument for the existence of God, which is simply this. God must have created all that we see and all that we know because it's so complicated that it gives evidence that there was a designer. It doesn't necessarily have randomness all around it. So that's teleological. Einstein comes along, and Einstein wrestles with a cosmological argument for the existence of God, which is simply this. Because there's a cause, that means that there's something that was there. So the universe has a cause. So essentially is this. Cars showed up in the parking lot today. How'd that happen? Well, somebody had to drive it there. So this was cosmological. This was Einstein. The universe didn't just show up. Someone had to put it there. But Einstein and atheists kind of come together on one thing, and they tried to believe that the universe didn't need a cause. They said, initially Einstein said the universe didn't need a cause, it didn't need to have a beginning. Then Einstein discovers his theory of relativity. And his theory of relativity saw that the universe is still expanding today, and it was continuing to expand from something, that the universe was still being created. And so they had some problems with the thought that everything was constant and it just showed up. And here was one of the problems. Have you ever seen a falling star? What does a falling star mean? It means a star ran out of juice and it died. And so what Einstein figured out in his theory of relativity is that if something has an end, then it must have had a beginning. When a tree dies, even if you didn't see the birth of that tree, there's something that had a beginning. And when a person passes, if something has an expiration date, then it had a beginning date. If something has an end, it must have had a beginning. And everything that has been made and created has an expiration date at some point. And so the theories of natural and biological sciences can only address that beings have been or are in existence. They cannot account for existence itself. Religion actually does this work. Now, I know many people of faith that are afraid of science. That doesn't need to be afraid of science. And I know many people of science that are afraid of faith. And those two entities are not at war with one another at all. But for our purposes today, I want us to try to understand that God created, and we were created in his image, and that first verb, create, is something that he invites us in to do. And as we've been exploring this, we know we need rest, we know we need restoration, we know we need connections with other people. On the backside of all that, when we get those rhythms right, there's something that can happen within us, which is being creative, having dreams, imagining, because dreams, imagining, the ability to create is a gift of God, but that really only happens well when it's in rhythm. So for those of you that like to cook, right? When your rhythms in your life are in good places, you enjoy cooking, don't you? When your rhythms in your life are out of rhythms, what do? Let's go grab something. We just need to go find something in a bag quick. Why? Because you don't have the space and place to create. And so what we've noticed, and you already know this isn't new information, but when you ignore the rhythms that are in your life, or you kind of push them to beyond the max that God has intended them to be, there are consequences. When you go and live beyond the rhythms of what your life should be like that we've talked about the last couple weeks, if you go beyond those, you probably mean you're going to destroy something or someone, and you're going to put yourself in a position where you have to apologize because of something that you have done because you've ignored rhythms of rest and renewal and connecting with one another. And the lie that I tell myself and the lie that you tell yourself is, well, next week looks better. Tomorrow's not going to be as bad. If we can just get to July seems like that's going to be really good. If we can just get to the fall, if we can just get to winter, if we can just get to spring, then life will slow down. But what we've been learning in this book is life isn't going to slow down. We have to change our rhythms to not keep up with life. We need to challenge and change our rhythms so that we get in sync with God. Because here's the scariest thing that we have to deal with is when we start going next week, next month, God gives us freedom. And we're able to set whatever pace we want to set. The Apostle Paul writes this down. He writes this down in the book of Galatians, his letter to the church of Galatia. And he says this in Galatians chapter 5:13. He goes, look, you, my brothers and sisters, you're called to be free. You can live at whatever pace in life you want. But in your freedom, there's problems with freedom because you've already figured this out. You have freedom to indulge in whatever you want to indulge in. And you can occupy your time with whatever you want to occupy your time with, rather than the rhythm that God created, which is to serve one another humbly in love. Now, when we are not able to love one another and we lose patience with one another and we're not kind to one another, it usually means that our rhythms are out of whack and we're pushed to the margin, and so we become what? Short with other people. Why do we become short with other people? It's because the rhythms that God created for our life are not being followed. Now, your parents understood this. This is why your parents gave you a curfew. They weren't just trying to make you miserable. They knew that you needed a rhythm in your life, and before you could make that decision for yourself, before you can be self-disciplined, you need to be parent disciplined. And so this is one of the things that your parents understood well. They gave you a curfew, and they knew this. They knew this. Your parents knew this. They knew that nothing good can happen with freedom when the sun goes down. Right? They knew that you're probably going to get bored, and you would try things at night that you would never try during the day. Why? Because you may not get caught. In the daylight, somebody might see. So they told you that you need to be home by 9, or you need to be home by 10, or you need to be home by 11, because they understood that things that happen in the light are good and things that happen in the dark are bad. So here's what I want to do. I want to pick up the text right there. Let's flip over to Ephesians at this point. The Apostle Paul again says, here's some things about rhythm and the cadence of life and getting up on time and going to bed on time and all these things this is why. These are the things that matter. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 11, he says this, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It's shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. This is why it is said, wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. And make the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. So it's pretty clear about how the Apostle Paul feels about those who are kind of plotting and planning and sort of hanging out in the darkness. And he's saying, if you don't have the margins and the rhythms correct in your life, if your rhythms get out of sync and you keep telling yourself, if I just keep going, it'll get better, it will cost you. So we live in the light and we're to sleep in the dark. And this is an important rhythm. Anybody in here who's had a baby knows the importance of the rhythm of sleeping. Babies, after living inside their mother's womb, their womb, for 9 months, for a really long time, and they listen to their mother's digestive, system, They're born and they have really hard time sleeping at night. Why? It's too quiet. They're used to sleeping when they're rumbling and gurgling and all kinds of stuff. And so oftentimes they get their days and nights confused because during the day it's noisy and they go, oh, it's noisy, time to sleep. And they get all quiet and they're like, oh, it's quiet, time to be awake. And so what do you do with babies? You try to reorient their life, their pattern, their rhythm, and their cadence, and you teach the baby another way to live. Not because you're trying to be demanding, but because you want something more for the baby's life. And so today, what we want to do is we want to explore the value and benefit of being in rhythm. That includes rest, which will lead to restoration, which will allow you to have more margin and space to connect with others, and ultimately lead us to a place where we're able to create and dream and imagine. My guess is it may have been a while since many of you, not all of you, but many of you have dreamed. Now, I don't mean the weird stuff that happens when you fall asleep at night and then there was a purple octopus and that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about that, all right? I'm talking about when was the last time you had a dream for your life? When was the last time you had a dream and a goal for your future? And what happened to that? So if you've been following along with the book, Rebecca Lyons, I'll even give you page numbers, page 226 and 227 if you've kind of blew past those. I think there's some really good stuff on those 2 pages about dreaming, because one of the things that I find so often when I talk to people and communicate with people is so many people have given up on dreaming and imagining and looking out into the future and go, man, what if? And they've replaced that with, well, once we get to July, and once I get to Tuesday, and if I can just get through this quarter, and once this happens, and once that happens, and so there's just no time for dreaming. So in her book, Rhythms of Renewal, which we're reading, Rebecca Lyons talks about the obstacles to dreaming. And she has a couple reasons. The 2 main reasons that she says we no longer dream like we did when we were kids and we had goals. I'm not going to lie. I had some Tonka trucks as a kid, and I had a dream and a vision that in our backyard we had a field that with my Tonka trucks I would dream. I was going to build a Kmart. I'd use my Tonka trucks and try to build a Kmart back there because I thought it'd be great to have a toy store closer to my house. That was my dream, right? Don't laugh at my dream. I'm not going to laugh at your dream. I see how it is. Well, it's not a safe place here, I guess, sir. But here's what Rebecca says happens to our dreams. Affluence and boredom. So, we're wealthy compared to the rest of the world. Oh, I'm not wealthy. Have you seen gas prices? The fact that you can still afford it and drive your car here means you're wealthy. Dear, hate it when you do that. Yeah, I know. It's okay. You're wealthy. Here, all right, so let's take gas out of it. The fact that you can afford entertainment means you're wealthy. Because our solution for boredom is entertainment. That means you're wealthy. That means you're wealthy if you have so much time that you need to figure out what to do with your boredom, that you pay for things to help you not be bored. That means you're affluent. And so when we don't have work all the time to survive and we get bored, boredom leads to a life of entertainment. So talk to a single mom who has to walk 2 jobs. Ask her what she's watching on Netflix right now and how much time she's had to scroll through her phone. She doesn't. She does not have the time. But when we have too much time on our hands and too little responsibility, what happens is we're headed towards an identity and an anxiety crisis, because our boredom used to lead us to creativity, but nobody gets bored anymore because we are so afraid of boredom. We don't take the time to be creative and to dream, because boredom leads us to our devices, right? How many of you, when a commercial comes on, you go straight to your phone? Because you're like, oh, dear God, I don't know if I can make it. I need to do something, right? And here's the thing. As much as we would like to make this an adolescent issue, I know more senior adults addicted to Facebook. It's an adult issue too, because we're finding ourselves with too much entertainment and streaming and Netflix and binge watching. And it's not just an adolescent issue or a young adult issue, it's an issue. Because all of this constant need to be entertained is leading adults to lose their rhythm of rest and restoration, and you've lost your ability to create and dream, and your dreams and your goals are dying. And your goal is now to make it to the end of the week, which isn't a dream. And if it is, it's a sad dream. You're not planning for something new and something fun, or to try to learn something new. And so this morning I thought it'd be fun, not fun, but not really, to picture yourself in the future. Are we just going to be an older version of ourselves, still scrolling and binge watching, or are we going to be reaching our dreams because we were created to create? So I wrote down some signs that show you are longing to create, but you're not exactly sure what to do with those longings. Here's some danger signs. This is signs that you're out of rhythm, you're not restoring, you're not connecting with others. When you are worrying about what others think, that's probably means that you need more rest and restoration time, and you need to connect with others. Because you're thinking more about what others think of you rather than what you can do or what you can make. If you're often overly sensitive, thinking about what you don't have, and scrolling can propagate that. That's a sign. That should be a trigger that I think my rhythms may be off. When you're willing to compromise your values, or laugh at something maybe you shouldn't laugh at, or language or poor choices, or take on debt, or all those kinds of things, it's usually a sign that your rhythms are out of mess and you're just trying to find something to make you feel better. When you're hesitant to share your faith because you think, it's just weird, I'd rather just pray for them. It's a sign that your rhythms and your restoration and your connection with God is a little bit out of whack. When you have a hard time saying no to others, and you say yes to everything except for your family, that's a sign that your rhythms of rest and renewal they've just gotten off. And idolatry is kind of a form of putting other people ahead of Christ, because you're constantly seeking the approval and applause from everyone except for the God who created you, the God who wants you to create, the God who wants you to create something in your life, with your future, in your family, in those pieces and there. And so what happens is when entertainment becomes too big in our life, and binging becomes the norm, and scrolling becomes how we handle boredom, inadvertently, this God who created all becomes so small that he has absolutely no relevance in our life. We're grateful for him, and we have admiration for him, but we don't surrender and give him everything. And the reason is because we're not resting and being renewed. We're just tasking ourselves to death. And so I love what the Apostle Paul says in Galatians. He starts the book of Galatians off in Galatians chapter 1. He says this about himself. Am I now seeking human approval? Or am I seeking God's approval? Or am I trying to please people? Because if I were still pleasing people, I would not be a servant of Christ. This isn't new information. This isn't new stuff. Even the ancient Hebrews, In the ancient Hebrews, when they were down in Egypt and they were slaves, they found themselves not resting, not being renewed because they were slaves, and their value and worth was based off of how many bricks they could make for Pharaoh, how many things they could build for Pharaoh. And so every day they learned that their value and worth was based off of their productivity. And you don't have many dreams and you don't have many goals when your day is survive the day, make bricks, make Pharaoh happy, right? And so they were caught up in numbers. They were caught up in the production line. They were caught up in their quotas. They were caught up in their quarterly numbers. They were caught up in winning. They were caught up in what their boss thought of them. And yeah, their schedules forced them out of the rhythms of rest, work for 6, stop for 1. Wake up with the sun, go to bed with the sun. And so they were all out of this. And then once we get out of those, we try to control because our calendars and our schedules are spiraling out of control. So we try to control those around us. I mean, how many of us have tried to control our kids or our spouse or your grown-up kids or your spouse's schedule or your coworkers or your employees, your finances? And so what we find when we begin to look at this is that there are rhythms that are designed to keep us healthy and whole. And when we ignore those rhythms that the God of the universe created and put in us, our lives get out of balance and we are constantly tired, frustrated, and everyone is a frustration to us. And one day we wake up and we go, how did I get here? And unfortunately, the answer to that is we decisioned our way there. And God says, I've given you this gift called your life. And I want you to dream and create your way into the future. Don't default your way into the future. Because a life that just is filled with unfair criticism of others and filled with unwise comparison and filled with just mind-numbing entertainment keeps us. It literally prohibits us from a life of dreaming and creating a different future for us and for our families. Because God has called you to do something. And it has a whole lot less to do with your power and your ability to schedule, and it has more to do with his presence in you and moving through you. So don't be afraid of boredom. Boredom may be the very thing God needs to bring you to so that he can begin to dream new dreams in you so that you can create and make something of the days ahead that resemble the image and likeness of God. Make a memory. Make a food. Do a project. My family knows that whenever my rhythms are out of whack, it usually means there's a project coming. People have asked, hey, how are you in Emerson's garden? Great. Why'd you do a garden? I needed to create something. Because those are the things that we just are a part of, that when we create and we have the space and margins to create, we're at our best. And so if you don't have the space and time to create, back up and go, God, I think some of my rhythms are out of whack. I used to like doing this, but it's been years since I've done that. I used to love being and going here, but it's been a long time. So this morning I want to pray with you. Because God is with you and he wants to be with you and he's not trying to take things from you, and it's not about guilt and it's not about, oh gosh, I feel terrible. It's about, hey, today is where you are, and how can we allow God to create something inside of us? And God can't create something inside of us until we're willing to pause and rest, be restored, connect with other people. And once you get that right, I think you'll be amazed at the dreams and the ideas that you have for your future and for your family. that are rooted in the presence of God. So today, as we close, you may want to light a candle and go, you know what, God, my dreams are just dead. I don't even remember what my dreams are anymore. Maybe you just want to light a candle and say, God, I need you to awaken that in me. Maybe today you want to take communion, go to the station, bring it back to your seat, and take communion and go, God, you died for more than what I'm living for. You died to give me life, and I feel like I'm a slave to my calendar. Maybe today you want to write down a prayer request in the back of your chair, or you want to go up to the cross and grab one and write one down and just go, God, hey, this has got to go, and help me not to be afraid of being bored, so that you have the time and the space to speak and do something through me, because that's usually on the other side of boredom. Can I pray with you today? God, I'm glad and grateful that you've chosen to use your servant, Rebecca Lyons, to write some things down in a book that's been so helpful for us, because it's been like inviting a trusted friend into our lives to say, hey, time out. Time out. Do you know why you're living the way that you're living? And I think our answer has been, not really. It's just what it is. It's just how people live. That's what you have to do these days. And God, that didn't really feel like a great answer. So would you do something in us and through us? You are a creative God. And you've not created us to be like robots who just kind of move throughout our weeks. You've invited us to be creative and imaginative in the ways in which we live with one another. So would you help us today to find something today, even that we can create, even if it's a memory or a moment, so that we can link our heart with your heart and acknowledge that this is a season of rest, renewal, connection, so that we can join you in the creative dreaming process. We love you. Amen.
Thanks so much for joining us today. If you love the content you heard and you'd like to know when the new content becomes available, scroll down and like and subscribe to our channel. Again, thanks so much for being here today, and we can't wait to see you next week.